Now this week, Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development Minister Thoko Didiza lifted the countrywide ban on movement of cattle after 21 days. The minister has applauded traditional leaders, communities and police who helped in limiting the spread of foot and mouth disease. To unpack this even further, I'm joined by Minister Thoko Didiza. Minister Didiza, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Today you engaged with farmers in Limpopo affected by, essentially one of the world's most infectious animal diseases. What were some of the outcomes and challenges farmers in Guyana faced?
Thank you very much to you and your listeners. Firstly, what was important in today's engagement with farmers in Hlomela in the Mopane district, they appreciated and understood the need for the ban that was put in place. They also appreciated that given their circumstances and the proximity to the park, particularly the Kruger Park, where you have got buffaloes and the interactions in terms of proximity, does not enable them to have the benefits of the lifting of this ban like anyone else. What we were therefore discussing today is how do we address the challenges that those farmers face in terms of the market access, but also strengthening their biosecurity. So we've agreed collectively that one of the things we're going to do is to have a feedlot in that area. We're going to improve the dip tanks that are there so that the dipping services are actually available. And thirdly, we're going to construct an abattoir. This will enable those farmers to have a market closer to where they are so that they can protect the other areas without them losing the value of the animals that they are having in terms of market access.
Yeah. So what essentially formed the basis of your decision not to extend the national ban?
Because we have picked up an infection around that area which is in the protected zone. And we know that in the protected zone, you will always have this problem, as I say, because of proximity. So that's why we've decided that we're not going to leave the ban in that area in particular. So we've agreed with the farmers also that as a preventative measure going forward, we will have to continuously vaccinate in that area to be able to prevent any infection getting out of the protected zone.
Yeah. With efforts to continuously vaccinate, do you believe that at the time you could have perhaps acted a lot sooner when the cases first were reported in order to prevent the national ban? Why did it have to take so long?
I must say that we did act sooner, but as you would know, that there are culprits, unfortunately, in any of the industries. And that's why you have to always continuously do your surveillance and actually allow for reporting also from farmers so that when they see the disease, they do not keep quiet. If they see illegal movement, they do not keep quiet. But the other issue that we have noted in this case is that beyond the illegal movement, some of the farmers do not clean their vehicles, after they have loaded animals, moving them from one point to the other. Because that decontamination is a very important element in the animal health system's value chain. Because if you do so, you prevent any other form of disease that can be carried by the same vehicle that has had, contaminated animals, if you then were to put others on the same vehicle without it being decontaminated.
What are the repercussions for those farmers who may move animals that don't meet the legislative requirements? Surely that would be reversing some of the gains that you're hoping to make.
In terms of the Animal Disease Act, we can actually report the matter to the police, investigations are done, and there will be penalties for those farmers who have been found to deliberately, neglect and also be responsible for the spread of diseases.
To date, have any of the farmers been arrested, perhaps you know?
When investigations are going on, we are working with the law enforcement agencies in that regard, because you don't just arrest, you first need to investigate so that you can establish whether this was a deliberate act or it was because the farmer did not know, there was no presentation of that those animals are sick, and whether there was, you know, negligence on the part of the officials who were supposed to have allowed through the permit for the movement of those animals. So those are the investigations that we're undertaking.
Some organizations, Minister, have been very critical, saying that the 21-day ban on the movement of cattle was not sufficient because the provincial borders were not closed.
Well, I'm not sure what would be that criticism, because indeed the provincial borders were closed. That's why when we announced the ban, we gave a 48-hour window period, particularly for those feedlotters who import their animals from our neighboring countries such as Botswana and Namibia. So there was nothing that actually was allowed to move between countries during the 21 ban.
What will happen? Pardon me, Minister. What will happen in instances where there are still active infections? I mean, have you made a call for more stricter measures pertaining to the movement of animals meant maybe for direct slaughter?
That is why we announced when we lifted the ban, there are certain areas where the ban is not lifted, where it will be extended, and we've actually declared those a disaster management area. A disaster management area means you look at the epicenter, you calculate a particular radius around the epicenter, where you actually control and make sure that everything that is in that epicenter and the surrounding doesn't move out. There's nothing that comes in. You actually vaccinate. You repeat after 14 days to test the animal so that you can be convinced that there is no infection that is still continuing in that area. And you continue to monitor that area in a more concerted effort. So those disaster management areas, if you look at the statement we made yesterday, are there in the schedule in our maps, and we've also indicated on the Gazette which ones are those areas where there is no lift of the ban.
So in light of the current state of the economy and looking at export matters, South Africa losing its FMD free status with the World Organization for Animal Health, there has been some lost ground, some lost opportunities. How are you assisting in efforts to regain the FMD free status, to open up new markets perhaps?
Well, if I may just say, the interventions that we've made now, it has actually given comfort to some of our trading partners that indeed we are addressing the challenges that we have been facing in the management of this disease. That's why China, for instance, have allowed our wool exports to China, which were actually stopped around March as a result of the infection that was picked up in March in Northwest and part of Free State in particular. And they have been monitoring what has been happening. We continue to engage with our trading partners because that's what gives comfort to anybody with whom you trade, convinced about the mechanisms that we have put in place and therefore decide that they would want to continue to trade with you. We are continuously working with our veterinary services, with our animal health specialists, together with the farmers to make sure that we do regain our status. And if I may just say, in terms of the International Animal Health Organization, it is appreciated that around the Kruger Park, as well as part of, Lubombo district, we have what we call a protected zone. So there in those areas, it is understood that you might have an infection arising. But from those areas to the entirety of the country, you don't have the challenge. That is why we want to make sure that we clear, particularly in the areas such as Viljoenskroon, Makwad, Potchefstroom, Shabisa, Mtubatuba, Nongoma, Ulundi. And once we are able to indeed deal with that issue there, we will apply again to the OIE for our disease-free status.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time, Minister Thoko Didiza.